to gratefully recognize the members of our agency sponsorship program. Without these sponsors, we would not be able to offer these education series to you. So today's presentation is Building a Foundation for Housing Success. It's part of a housing series that we're doing. It's the first one where we're going to try to cover quite a bit of material in a short time. You should have received the PowerPoint presentation an hour before today's meeting. You will also receive a follow-up email with the presentation as well as a link to the video. So we do record the meeting. There's quite a bit of resources at the end of the presentation, links to affordable housing resources, as well as webinars that the ARC and MA21 has done recently on relevant topics to housing. So as I mentioned, today's basics, we are very interested in your feedback. The survey is anonymous. We especially want to hear if there's information you want to know about that we didn't cover in today's presentation, because as I said, we've got a lot to cover and a lot about affordable housing, because we see that as a very useful tool for many of our people with disabilities to be able to live and have successful lives in the community. And we will be talking about that later. And we will have a link for the survey we want you to complete at the end as well. So just a few more housekeeping details. The webinar is recorded, the PowerPoint and a link to the YouTube channel will be provided and emailed to all registrants after the presentations. Please put all your questions in the chat. We will get to as many as possible at the end of the presentation. And our presenter has graciously agreed to stay a little bit later if we need to, but this is meant to be a 1-hour webinar, so we've got quite a bit to cover. And as I mentioned, the link to complete the feedback survey will be at the end of the presentation. And we use that information to do a better job in webinars going forward. At this time, I would like to thank our presenter. Laura Gallant is with the DDS Northeast Region, Community Resource Specialist. Laura has had years of experience working with families and with DDS, and her background covers transition age, a lot of the areas that are most relevant to you, as well as a deep dive into affordable housing and what those options provide for our families. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you all for joining today. Before we get started, just a little bit more about myself. You know, I've worked for DDS for 11 years, and as Jackie mentioned, more than half that time in the role of a service coordinator and transition coordinator. When I started at the Northeast Regional Office about 5 years ago, it was right around the time that the housing crisis began to unfold in Massachusetts with rising costs and shortage of housing stock. About 2 years ago, there was a new secretariat that was formed in Massachusetts to address the growing housing needs. That's called Housing and Livable Communities. We'll be talking about that more in a minute. But around the same time, there was an emergency shelter system that was reaching a crisis level, and a cross-secretariat emergency response team was formed. I had the opportunity to become involved with that as the DDS representative for the initial phase. As part of that, I learned and found a new appreciation for all the complexities of housing programs and the extraordinary expenses of housing. When I returned to DDS, my passion for expanding housing for individuals served by DDS became a focal point. I really want to make sure that individuals eligible for DDS services are taking advantage of all the appropriate housing programs and services offered by our sister agencies. That includes state and local government programs. And this is really what I want to talk about today. I do want to note that the information in this presentation is reflective of a point of time. Most of the information included within these slides is available online. And because housing is such a complex subject, there are many links embedded in this presentation. We likely won't be able to get to everything today, but please refer to those websites for more detailed information and the most up-to-date information. This presentation doesn't represent an offer of services from DDS, but it's an informational offering on housing options. You see in front of you today's agenda. We'll be talking about DDS and the role in housing, the current climate for housing in Massachusetts, and then we'll take a little dive into the affordable housing programs out there, what's offered, who's eligible, and how to apply, really what you need to know. My hope is after this presentation, you'll have some concrete information to build upon for a successful housing plan. With this foundational knowledge, we're hopeful that you'll return to part 2 of the series next month, which focuses, as Jackie said, on that creative person-centered housing planning, essentially taking that house and making it a home. The slide that Jackie just presented here is really these are the typical living arrangements or the home settings in which DDS can offer a varying degree of services. Services in the home setting are generally focused on safety and ADLs and independent living skills, and they are based on individuals' identified needs, goals, and goals in relation to their disability. Thank you for that slide here. Housing is often thought of where a person lives, and while some people are supported in 24/7 settings, such as group homes or shared living models, which you can see in the dark orange here on this pie chart, the bulk of today's presentation focuses on community housing options, meaning there's a rental agreement for a unit between an individual and a landlord or property manager. Most DDS eligible individuals are supported in this type of setting, as you can see, living with family or living in their own apartment. Living independently in their own apartment does not mean living unsupported. So I want to get into that. That's very important. DDS's role in this form of housing is to provide education about the types of properties and the subsidies that are available, and at times assist with the application process. And as needs change, DDS does strive to alter those services to meet the changing needs. So one consistent theme that you may be hearing from me today is that communication and keeping an open line of communication is really essential with your local DDS area office. These changes and needs, they do happen annually at the ISP, but these discussions should be happening year round. We don't want to wait for the ISP to talk about these needs and any changes in needs. So if you take that pie chart and you look at it from just a little bit of a different angle, not who provides the support and care, but the level of needed support. On the left, we have individuals requiring 24-hour support. Not all the supports in this column are DDS contracted supports. Some are funded via other means, like our sister agencies, DDS sister agencies, or private pay arrangements. On the right, you'll find individuals who don't require round-the-clock support and supervision. So I'm going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into this, but I wanted to put it out on a piece of paper here. The next slide will really talk about DDS services and DDS's role in housing. So DDS services are always based on the level of needed support and the available resources. So these are some of the typical DDS services that could be offered in an individual's home setting. So when an individual is living with their family, we have what's called in-home supports. That's X amount of staff hours coming into the family home to help your loved one with certain ADLs, aspects of independent living, safety, whatnot. We also have family support and navigation for caregivers. There's also respite care available for families. That respite care can be a planned break occasionally, or can also be used, unfortunately, if emergency situations happen. Respite could be available. When we talk about services in someone's own apartment, we have individual support services called ISS. It's fairly similar to the in-home support model, although this is specific to the individual in their own apartment. There's also remote supports and monitoring and assistive technology. And then we talk about DDS in a residential setting. That's where we talk about intensive supports for all aspects of care provided by agency staff. And on the right-hand side here, we talk about the person-centered staff supports, which could include one or many of the following areas of need. Now, again, this is specific to housing. We're not talking about day supports or vocational supports. This is all about supports in the home setting. Today's training is not an extensive overview of all the DDS contracted support and service models. There is a DDS 101 info session or many info sessions available. And these sessions can take a deeper dive into DDS service models, not just in the home, but in those other settings that I had just mentioned, like day programs and at work. All of the services are based on need and they're provided through your local DDS area office. This is why it is so important to keep that open line of communication with your service coordinator, with your area office, because that's where all of the supports and services are based out of. So when we talk about DDS residential models, DDS residential is defined as 24-hour support outside of the family home. There are currently 2 residential models offered for those who are deemed most vulnerable and who have the greatest need. Those models include group home living and shared living. Group home, you are all likely familiar with. That's a residential setting where individuals share a home with others. They receive 24-hour staff support through an agency. That agency is licensed and contracted with DDS. Typically, they're nonprofit organizations. We do have state-operated group homes as well. And then we have shared living, which is a program where an individual will live in a private home with a community member or what's called a provider who offers personalized support and companionship. That home setting is typically the provider's home, but there have been situations where it may be an individual's home where a shared living provider comes to live with them. Individuals are prioritized for these models of care through an assessment process. The assessment is a multifaceted approach. It takes into consideration the needs of the individual and the needs of the caregiver. When somebody is identified as a high priority for this type of model, the process of finding appropriate placement occurs with DDS in collaboration with the individual and family. The prioritization process occurs through your local DDS area office. Again, while the process is standardized across the state, there are several factors that make planning a moving target. Some of those factors include the wants and the needs of the individual and the family, the peer group, the identified peer group that is important, the desired location. In addition to the needed time frame and the available resources in the area at that point of time. Jackie did mention that there was a previous webinar related to these assessments, and the link to that webinar is included in the resource page at the end of this presentation. Prioritization can differ over time, which is why communication is really key. Needs will likely change over time. So even if you don't need anything today, it is very important to stay in touch with your local DDS service coordinator and area offices. This will really allow for proper planning, proactive planning for long-term and short-term goals, but also if an emergency occurs. DDS can best support your loved one collaboratively when the needs and the goals and the vision are known. Services are person-centered, but the needs of a caregiver are an essential factor, and our assistance is most effective with ongoing guidance and involvement from the individual and the family. I felt that it was important to include the DDS mission statement, which reads, the department's mission is to create in partnership with others innovative and genuine opportunities for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to participate fully in their communities and meaningfully engage as valued members. So I did put in partnership with others in bold, as these partnerships are extremely important when we talk about housing, particularly housing outside of the DDS residential models we just covered. Who are those partners, we would ask? Obviously, family is a very important, most essential partner in the mission. The community and the village of that, the kinship network, the natural support network. But when we talk about professional supports, I'm referring to the public service partners on a state and federal level, as long as those partners on a municipal level. Housing plus services. So this is a model that is proven to be extremely successful. When I talk about housing, when I reference housing, it's really about the physical home, the roof over someone's head, the furnishings, the utilities. Specifically, that is about the cost of housing. It often seems to be the largest barrier. Our housing partners could include local housing authorities, EOHLC, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, that's the state agency, state secretariat, HUD, which is federal, and then some of the homeownership programs out there, like Habitat for Humanity's homeownership program, Section 8 has a homeownership program, there's specialized housing. I believe part 2 of this training series will take a deeper dive into some of those unique models, which will be really exciting. And when we talk about service partners, DDS can offer an array of services in the home for successful living, although our sister agencies can be essential partners for needs that are beyond disability needs. These partners could include partners like DMH, Department of Mental Health, Massability, which is formerly known as MRC, Mass Health. Their partnerships in terms of residential supports like the Adult Family Care Program, or personal care assistance, visiting nurses, homemaker supports, and then AGE, which is formerly known as Elder Affairs. So if you're feeling that your loved one would benefit from involvement with one of these agencies, talk with your team, talk with your service coordinator. If appropriate, you can get connected with these external partners to learn more about their resources and work on the eligibility process with them as needed. So talking about transitioning to community living, we do know moving out of a family home is a huge step. And with any large step comes worries. On the left-hand column here, you'll find some of the common worries that we hear from families. There's a lot of risk involved. There's faith that's needed when a loved one is transitioning to more independent setting. What about their safety and their health? Are they going to be isolated in their new setting? Clearly there's a shortage of housing stock and there's a competition for all those scarce resources that are out there. Staffing shortages, which would become more evident since COVID, unfortunately. And then the affordability component, rent is really just out of reach. Path forward, how do we get over some of those challenges? Part of that is proactive planning and knowing your options and identifying those resources, combining your natural support network, your family, your friends, and your professional support network. Could be DDS services, it could be other external partners. Assistive technology, which is very exciting in terms of helping people live independently. And then planning for sustainability, because each plan is unique. So again, that will be covered in part 2, that creative, unique, sustainable planning. And then affordable housing programs. Assistance and affordability is a key area of concern for families and individuals. So I wanted to review really at length what that path forward looks like in terms of affordability. So, unfortunately, we live in a very expensive state here in Massachusetts. Housing costs are really just out of reach. We're the 4th most expensive state to live in, right behind California and Hawaii and New York. Because of that, these affordable housing programs that are offered for low-income households are extremely important in Massachusetts. The cost will vary depending on what part of the state that you live in. Like here, I wrote the fair market rent. Fair market rent is sort of what the average rent is. In Boston, a 1-bedroom apartment, almost $2,500 per month. While in Springfield, that same exact apartment might be $1,300. Regardless, it is really just out of reach in terms of affordability, particularly when we talk about individuals who really rely on Social Security benefits to sustain them financially, maybe a part-time job. Waitlist for these programs, particularly in Massachusetts, can be extremely long, so it is really essential to plan ahead. Eligibility, I want to talk a little bit about that. It's really about the income of the total household, the anticipated household, and that the income limits and the rents vary depending on the location. But I do have links again embedded in this slide for you to find out what that income limit is and what that fair market rent is for your local community. So all of the affordable housing programs that we'll be reviewing today do have the income thresholds for for eligibility based on their household size. These vary by program, and sometimes they really even vary within the certain program. These programs are designed to assure that families aren't underhoused or overhoused. So the makeup of the household, the number of people in that household, really determines how many bedrooms are approved within that voucher. There's lots of nuances in these programs, and they can be challenging to navigate, but I don't want to get bogged down with those details today. So essentially wanted to provide you with the Cliff Notes version of the basics. Again, there are links that you can learn more information about these particular programs. But if we take all of the housing programs out there, we can really put them into two buckets. Those two buckets are mobile vouchers and project-based vouchers. Sometimes people use the word voucher or the word subsidy interchangeable, and they essentially are, but talk about a voucher, well, subsidy really is the government grant, the discount. That's what the subsidy is the discount. The voucher is like a coupon, proof of that discount. So when you take all of those housing programs out there, they can fall into these two categories: mobile vouchers, which mean they're attached to the tenant, attached to the head of household, or project-based vouchers. Project-based vouchers are attached to a specific unit. The three that I have bold here that are a little bit bigger, those are the ones that are most common. Those include Section 8, public housing, and private developments. So what we're going to talk about today is really, again, some of the basics of these programs, who's eligible, how to apply, and how to stay active on those wait lists. First, we'll talk about Section 8. This is the largest and most commonly known program in Massachusetts. Some people refer to Section 8 as the golden ticket. Section 8 does have project-based and mobile vouchers, but typically when people refer to Section 8, they're referring to the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is mobile Section 8, a mobile Section 8 voucher. Mobile Section 8 is, unfortunately, right now, the only place that you can apply for Section 8 is through the centralized waitlist online. I have that link later on in the slide to show you. The Section 8 waitlist really can vary. It can be anywhere from 2 to 12 years long, depending on where you live and what your needs are. For Section 8, it is a federally funded program. All of these programs are managed on a local level, regardless if they're federally funded or if they're state funded. Tenants can use the voucher anywhere in the US with mobile Section 8, as long as the rent is reasonable and the apartment meets health and safety standards. Typically with Section 8, you pay 30 to 40% of your income towards rent. Household members don't need to be related for Section 8. So if your loved one wants to live with a roommate who is a friend or a neighbor, as long as that person meets income guidelines for Section 8, then they are able to live together. Next slide. Public housing. This is the second most common type of housing program available out there. Public housing is state funded. Public housing is a project-based voucher. So that means all public housing options that are going to be offered to you are attached to a voucher, to a specific unit. If you're familiar with the slang term, the projects, that's where really this originated, from public housing project-based developments. Traditionally, these were larger complexes and buildings, but now public housing comes in many forms, from large developments to scattered sites, sometimes multifamily homes. Again, with rent is going to be based on income when you're in one of these developments. A percentage of the units are designated to people specifically who are elderly or disabled. And some of these developments are specific only to people who are 62 plus. Some of these developments also offer congregate and supportive housing, which we can get to in another slide here. But each local housing authority does screen their tenants separately, and they maintain their own wait list. Average wait list, maybe 1 to 5 years, depending on the town and depending on your specific needs. Again, most housing authorities aren't going to give you a specific number on the wait list because it's contingent upon a lot of factors: supply and demand and specific need of that applicant. We have state-funded vouchers. This is Massachusetts version of Section 8. These are mobile vouchers, but you are confined to living in Massachusetts. I don't think that's a problem for most of us since we are living here and receiving services in Massachusetts. But those two state-funded mobile vouchers are MRVP and AHVP. Interesting. Well, MRVP also has some project-based vouchers, but most of the time they are mobile. They are mobile and assigned to the tenant. AHVP is a voucher program that was created for individuals specifically who are under the age of 61 with a disability. They are typically just one-bedroom vouchers, unless someone requires a live-in aid through a reasonable accommodation. And again, the criteria is you must have a qualifying disability and under the age of, it's under the age of 61 when you are initially eligible. We have private developments. Those you probably see all over the place, all over your community popping up. These are, they're formally known as low-income housing tax credit sites. But really what they are is they're private developments. And unfortunately, you would have to apply for each development on their own. They all have their own specific wait list and application process. But the wait lists for these private developments are a little bit shorter. In these private developments, they are mixed income developments where these private property developers, they get a big tax break from the government if they reserve a certain amount of units for people who benefit from affordable housing. So people in these private developments, your neighbor might be paying fair market rent or more, but you may be paying rent that's fixed below market rate, or you might even have a voucher attached to that unit beyond the affordability piece. So there's lots of different options in private developments. And in a future slide, I will show you how to access availability and get on wait lists for these private developments. One thing that is important to mention is that DDS and our sister agencies, we have the ability to skip the traditional wait list at times at some of these developments through a program called the 3% Priority Program or the DDS DMH Set Aside Program. These vacancies are few and far between. We don't know when they're going to pop up and we don't know where they're going to pop up. So it is important. They shouldn't necessarily be a plan A for anybody, but they can always be an alternate in terms of a housing option. To access or to learn more about those set-asides or 3% priority options, please talk with your service coordinator. If your loved one is ready to live in their own apartment, these set-asides and these 3% priority vacancies, when the vacancies do arise, it requires a very quick turnaround with the application, with all the supporting documents, and with the move-in date. So 3% priorities and set-asides, again, such a quick turnaround. Just be prepared that if you want to learn more about these options, you want your service coordinator to keep you in the know if any of them become available, make sure you just let them know and be aware that the move-in will likely be very quick if they are approved to move into that place. There's also something called 811 housing. Just wanted to mention, Jackie, it's okay. Just 811 housing is another option. And these, there's not too many sites around the state, maybe 30 or so. But 811 housing is that is a wait list that is always open. You can access an 811 application from your DDS area office. 811 is also open to our sister agencies meaning DMH, MRC, Elder Affairs. So if you are interested, there is a statewide internal wait list for these programs, and we don't know how many people are on these wait lists. We don't know how many people how long the residents are going to live in these units and when those vacancies are going to arise. But if you do want to fill out an 811 application, you can talk with your DDS service coordinator. It's one universal application where you can check off all the different properties that you're interested in applying to. And then, it's just it's a plan B that you can put in your pocket. Congregate and supportive housing, I did mention these briefly. I know from a DDS lens, the words congregate and supportive might have a slightly different meaning than the housing definition of congregate and supportive. Congregate is a model, and supportive is a model that was made in collaboration with AGE, which is Elder Affairs. It was initially intended for seniors, but it is open to individuals with disabilities. These two links up here, congregate sites in Massachusetts and supportive housing sites in Massachusetts, will provide you a list of all of those opportunities around the state. In order to apply for congregate, you need to meet the income qualifications as well as the disability qualifications. Sort of a two-part application process. There is an Elder Affairs agency that you would want to be in touch with. That information is listed on these links here, as well as contacting the local housing authority for that specific town to make a referral there. So I know I've just breezed through those programs very quickly, but I did want to reassess them here to review those buckets again, because next we're going to talk about the eligibility, who's eligible for these programs and how to apply. So again, mobile, Section 8, MRVP and AHVP, project-based vouchers, which are typically public housing, congregate and supportive options live in public housing, and then those private developments where 811s, 3% priorities, and set-asides live in. Okay, so when we talk about eligibility, and don't want to get stuck in the weeds with all of the factors, because there are many variations depending on the program that you apply to. Some factor your gross household income, some factor your net household income, some factor all household members, where others maybe will exclude students or only include household members over the age of 18. You can find all of those nuances on the specific applications when you apply to the program. But the one thing that I really wanted to stress today is that with an annual income, you can see here with the income limits, if your loved one's annual income is less than $80,000, they can begin to qualify for some of these programs. Section 8, 50% of area median income. So if your loved one's income is $47,000 or less, you can begin to qualify for many more programs. And this is just really a basic outline, but if you look at the HUD income limits link there, it will bring you directly to the HUD website, and you can type in your specific community and it will bring up all of the income criteria. That information is also listed again on the applications when you specifically apply. And this is, sorry, Jackie, you did, just wanted to mention too, the future households, that is very important. So when you're talking about the eligibility and you're helping your loved one apply for these programs, you're not going to be including your income. You're going to be including the income of your loved one's income. This is the predicted household member or members. So you only want to include that information. Your income doesn't count. Another piece of important information is protected assets, right? So if you it is important to note these things on your application. So whether it's an ABLE account or a special needs trust, even something like an AFC stipend, if you're receiving adult family care stipend, that stuff is generally not counted towards income for these programs. It is important to note that information on there, but it will not be counted. It's typically really just wages and Social Security benefits. Those are the things that would count, most common things that would account towards income. So these are other factors that are not necessarily going to be, these are factors that beyond the eligibility that could potentially be barriers. Somebody's CORI, their background, their credit history, their rental history, and their citizenship status. Citizenship isn't really a factor for state housing programs, but with federal housing programs, at least one household member needs to be a citizen or eligible non-citizen, which is naturalized, lawful permanent resident, or somebody seeking asylum. Most of this stuff can be somewhat discretionary. What I mean by discretionary is maybe your loved one has poor credit, but now they have a rep payee in place and someone who can help them pay rent. Perhaps there is some CORI issues from incidents that stemmed from years ago. Your loved one is now in a very different place right now with their supports and just in terms of their stability. There are only a couple things that are absolute lifetime bans for affordable housing programs. Those include extremely violent crimes, registered sex offenders. With the exception of those couple lifetime bans, advocacy from family members, from team members, maybe having someone co-sign a lease or having a repayee in place, these really can help justify and overturn a decision. So if somebody is denied a certain housing program or a unit, based on the reason for denial, applicants have the right to appeal, and they should be encouraged to appeal if it's appropriate. So wait lists. So getting to the top of many wait lists, these are called, on every application that you fill out, there are going to be boxes called priorities and preferences. These are not eligibility factors to get on the wait list, but it really kind of determines where you land on the wait list. So these are some of the most common ones that I've listed here. Having a disability. Another one that I wanted to note, one of the local housing, a couple of the local housing authorities that I've been in touch with view individuals who are living with loved ones, if they have aging parents or parents with aging needs, and those parents are homeowners, that individual could possibly be considered facing homelessness, at risk of homelessness. If you are experiencing domestic violence, if you're transitioning from an institutional setting like a group home, that meets the definition. I don't love the word institution, but on the housing applications, they use that language, transitioning from an institutional setting. So if you're transitioning to a less restrictive level of care, if you're local, if you work locally, if you, and I'm sorry, I'm not you, your loved one, if the applicant works locally, goes to a day program locally, or resides in a local community, those communities will give you priorities and preferences over other traditional applicants. So again, they don't impact your eligibility, but they do determine where you land on the wait list. And then when you apply, slide here, there is, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, losing your spot on the wait list. So bad news for many people, but good news for you if you're paying attention today. If you follow these important steps, you will not lose your place on the wait list. Some people get dropped from the wait list and they don't even know about it. They might be expecting that they've been sitting on this wait list for years. And the reason these people get dropped from the wait list typically is because they don't change their they don't report any changes in their application, specifically to their address, their phone number, their anticipated household size, their contact information is the most important thing. Sorry, I'm just having trouble with my view here. Okay. So it is so essential to report changes in your application immediately. Report these changes in writing and note, if you can, the specific program or application ID number or reference number when you're reporting those changes. When you do apply for housing and you get on a wait list, that particularly if you're applying online, well, if you apply in paper application too, they're going to give you, once your application is submitted and you're active on a wait list, they're going to give you a control number or an application ID number. That's your reference number for that specific application. So it's important when if you change your address, you change your phone number, that you do make you do report these changes immediately to that, to whatever wait list you're on. Oftentimes people are sitting on a wait list for a while and they're expecting to get something, maybe an email, and they get a piece of snail mail and it gets delivered to their address that they were at 5 years ago. And, you know, housing authority, Section 8 and public housing, these wait lists get purged. They purge the wait list every few years. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason as to who gets purged, but what they will do is they'll notify you first and say, hey, we've noticed that you've been on the wait list for X amount of years. Are you still interested in staying on the wait list? Please reply And if you don't reply within that allotted time frame that they give you, they will just remove you from the wait list. So it's really important to report those changes immediately and respond to any correspondence that you receive. A lot of these applications can be accessed online. We're going to get into the application process in a minute. If you have an online account and you're applying online, it's important to keep record of that information and to log into your application every few months just to make sure that it stays active and updated. Applying online is great because if you do happen to change your phone number or you happen to change your address, you can just easily update that information without you losing your place in line. And there's little room for human error. You're not going to a housing authority and giving them information and hoping that the staff over there is going to upload it. Very limited room for human error if you are able to apply online, if it's appropriate. When you apply, wait lists don't impact one another. This is the money slide right here, how to apply. So we can talk about the wait list in a minute, but this is the slide where it has all the important links in terms of where you can apply and how to apply. The owner maintained project-based voucher wait list is something that I found online recently, has a list of all the project-based vouchers around the state. Mobile Section 8, when we talk about that, there are a little over 100 housing authorities that are on the centralized Section 8 waitlist. They participate in the centralized waitlist. That's only about a third of the communities in Massachusetts. But if you live or work in a town that participates in the centralized waitlist, you should be encouraged to apply online at this website here, affordablehousing.com. If your community doesn't participate in the centralized waitlist, you want to contact your local housing authority or your regional administrative agency. Unfortunately, those regional administrative agencies, those wait lists have been closed. So you would want to contact your local housing authority. Anyone can apply to the centralized wait list at any point, regardless if your town participates in it. I'm just seeing that we have about 10 minutes left of this presentation, so I'm not going to go through all these too much. It's pretty cut and dry in terms of where to access this information. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Some of these helpful tips are really important. I didn't want to miss out on talking about it. As I mentioned, completing an application online when possible and keeping your contact information updated are really essential. All those priorities and preferences, which will determine where you are on the wait list, check off all the ones that apply to you because that will bump you up on the wait list, but only check off the ones that actually are applicable to you. There's a third-party agency that's going to come in when you reach the top of the wait list. When you get close to the top, this third-party agency is going to say, prove that you are homeless at no fault of your own, prove that you are a veteran, prove that you are X, Y, and Z, whatever you check off on your wait list. When they reach out to you, reply ASAP and apply early. Check the status often. One thing, one application does not impact the other, so you can and should apply to as many programs as you believe you might qualify for. If you reach the top of the wait list and you're not ready at that point, you can just say no, thank you. If you reach to the top of the wait list and you're not eligible for one reason or another and you're denied, you're not going to be kicked off all the other wait lists. So it is important to apply early and to apply to as many as possible. Starting a housing folder by staying organized. This is very important. It might sound remedial, but starting a housing log to track all of the programs that you applied to, all the specific units you may have applied to, and any of those usernames and passwords and application ID numbers, those are very important. So you can then refer back to them every couple months to follow up. When you reach the top of the wait list, there are some essential documents that are needed. I have seen people miss out on housing opportunities because they reach the top of the wait list and they don't have a valid state ID. An ID is needed for all HUD housing opportunities like Section 8. If you can't find your birth certificate or your social security card, that may be a problem. A lot of this information is time sensitive. So it's important to start a housing folder and gather these documents ahead of time. Something like proof of income, like your bank statements, your social security award letter, and pay stubs. You don't need to keep a copy of every one of those for years and years and years. When you reach the top of the wait list, they will give you a time frame, likely they'll give you a little bit of a heads up, and you should be able to access this information through the portal or through your online systems. And then the proof of any priorities and preferences that you apply for, and make sure that you have documentation to back that up as well. If you need any further help with the application process, there are what's called housing and consumer education centers out there in your local community action programs, your local family support center, your local DDS office, and your local DDS service coordinator. All of these might be options for you to get some more guidance with. This is one of my favorite websites here, the EOHLC Resource Locator Tool. It's a lookup tool. It's a comprehensive directory. You can put in whatever, you can put in a town, whatever your local community is, and it's going to bring up all of the local housing resources from your local housing authority to housing court, where you go for fuel assistance or raft funding, how to apply for Section 8. Lots of helpful information there. I often refer to that website probably daily. I did want to put a slide in about fair housing and equal access, because it is against the law to discriminate based on a disability, also based on the income status. Unfortunately, there is some discrimination that happens out there with landlords when you have Section 8. There are protected classes here, and those protected classes get a little bit deeper in Massachusetts. And under ADA and fair housing, reasonable accommodations or reasonable modifications should be honored as long as it doesn't pose an unnecessary financial or administrative burden to the landlord or to the property manager. A couple examples of accommodations. I mean, we all know about something like a service animal, right? But what about collecting rent on the 5th of every month because your Social Security benefits come in on the 1st? What about a live-in aid because you require more 24/7 care? So you're a household of one person, but you get a voucher for a household of two. These are the unique things that I believe Kathy Boyle's probably going to be talking about at length at the next training. But I did want to mention that, modifications and accommodations don't need to be just the ramp or the grab bars. There's a lot of unique modifications and accommodations that could be tailored to your loved one with a disability. This link at the bottom, Fair Housing Alliance in Massachusetts, is where you could potentially access resource if you feel like you're not being treated fairly or there's some discrimination. Okay, so we're at the end. I'm sorry I talked so quickly, but there's just so much information to cover. Big takeaways today. Affordable housing programs like the ones that I mentioned are often needed for the financial sustainability. Pouring your foundation early, and do that by applying to these programs as soon as you're eligible. Your loved one can begin to qualify for these programs and apply for programs at the age of 18. It's very, very easy to get on these wait lists. What you're doing when you're filling out these applications is you're filling out a preliminary application. Most likely, you're going to know most of the answers to those questions on the application off the top of your head. So it's not like filling out a Social Security award letter, applying for Social Security benefits or anything. It's very easy to apply, and there's no commitment to get on wait. When you get on wait lists, there's no commitment. Apply early and check the status often. Concurrent, proactive, and person-centered planning is essential. So again, stay tuned for more of that with part 2 of this housing webinar. DDS can be a valuable success to independent living. Good communication with the DDS area office is essential to best support your housing needs as well as any changes in need. Those are really the big takeaways. Essentially, affordable housing can be a huge piece of the puzzle, particularly in Massachusetts, because the cost of housing is just so out of reach. So applying early, using the resources in the slides here to help with the application process or to navigate those programs a little bit more would be really helpful. These online resources, again, the resource tool, the lookup tool. We have a couple other really great resources here. There are guides to emergency and long-term housing assistance, and various other resources that are really helpful in the navigating the housing world. And Kathy, Jackie, did you put in, here they are, links to the other recorded webinars that the ARC has done. I'll turn it over to you, Jackie, before we maybe open it up for questions.
Thank you, Laura. Take a minute. That's a very impressive amount of information you covered in a short time. I'm glad it's recorded. People can go back and listen and definitely check out those links. So on this slide, I've included links to some of the webinars we've done. Actually, they've all happened in the last year. The DDS appeals process one was just last week, led by a disability attorney through MA 21. And what you should know about adult waivers, Foundation for Identifying Appropriate Services, the whole needs assessment piece. I included the ones on Mouse Health, the basics, and then the follow-up 201, because it talks specifically about PCA and AFC services. And then the one at the bottom, which I think was last October, November, is about creating an effective individual support plan. As you mentioned, that is with the ISP, with the assessments or some of the foundations for determining what your loved one's needs are and goals and visions for life. And then there is the link for, if you haven't already registered for the webinar next month, which is going to be creating a home, which is a follow-up to this one. We'll do a deeper dive in some of the creative and alternative solutions people are looking for in terms of housing. And then lastly, I've got the link to that feedback survey that I mentioned. We are looking for specific feedback in terms of, should we have another series about housing, a deeper dive maybe in the residential piece and that process. We know we tried to cover a lot here with the basics. We didn't cover everything, but I am now going to open it up for some questions. We are only able to take general questions, not too specific, just in the interest of time. And so I will stop sharing now. You do have that link, and I think we'll put the link in the chat as well, so that people can access that and give us their feedback. So here we go. We see there's still a lot of people here. Thank you for hanging in with us. And I don't know if Diane has had a chance to maybe organize some of the questions. I know we had 43 messages in the chat that Laura and I were not able to see during the presentation. So I'm going to, if you're comfortable leading that, Diane, have you been able to organize them at all? And we'll try to get through as many as we can with just some brief responses. Laura, whatever you're able to tell us in the time we have left.
All right, so Jackie, a lot of the comments, I was actually responding to some questions that really didn't have to do with the presentation, but here we go. So the first question there was, do you have a total number of DDS clients in all venues in Massachusetts? Ann Berube actually shared a link in the chat. So I think we're going to skip over that question, seeing that it's really not specific to the presentation. Another question, can you apply to any of these housing resources before the age of 18?
So no, not as the head of household. If you as a family member would qualify for these programs as well, you can apply as the head of households for the programs and include your loved one, whether that loved one is 16 or whatever age that loved one is. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next question is, could any of these programs apply to adult students with IDD experiencing college through an IPSE program to help cover their room and board fees? If this hasn't been discussed previously, is it something for the future?
I don't know that answer. It's been quite a while since I've been a transition coordinator, and the IPSE that you referenced, I'm not familiar with that. In general, room and board is typically part of tuition. and would be sort of financial aid based. I don't believe something like a Section 8 voucher could be used in a college dorm type setting. Yeah, I don't believe so. I can look into that more though.
All right, good question then, right? So just bear with me, if applied through CHAMP and to several local authorities, do you send address change only to CHAMP? And do they automatically update the LHA?
Yes, so that is a good question. CHAMP is something I didn't even mention the word CHAMP, but it's very important in the housing world. CHAMP stands for Common Housing Application for Massachusetts Programs, excuse me. You can fill out a CHAMP application online. When you fill it out, what you're mainly applying for is public housing across the state. It's one universal application. You can check off every town that you're interested in applying to. But CHAMP also has AHVP and MRVP opportunities. You can just check off boxes. I would encourage people to check off those boxes if they meet criteria. For example, you're non-elderly and disabled, you could apply for AHVP if you're a household of one. MHVP, anyone, and MRVP, anybody can apply for that as long as you meet the income threshold. Family, definition of a family is a family of one person too. You don't have to be more than one person to be a family in the housing world. So I would encourage you to apply for both. When you do apply, you're going to get an application
Okay, I'll have
ID
them done.
number. That application ID number would be specific to the program that you're applying for. So if you're applying for, you're going to have to access that, reference that application ID number with any changes. Most likely it would be just CHAMP. I haven't had any personal experience with getting 3 different application numbers because I've applied for MRVP, AHVP, and public housing. But I haven't personally done that application myself. I have with individuals before. But in terms of the follow-up, I think it is just one universal. If there's anybody else on the call, I don't know if Kathy Boyle's here. Maybe she knows the answer to this.
I think Kathy had a commitment right at
Okay.
1. That's why she was
Okay.
just gonna
Yeah.
watch it.
Regardless, whatever place you apply to, they are going to give you specific instructions about how to update information for that specific application or program that you're applying for. So even though I don't know the answer, when you do apply, that information should be clearly listed on your CHAMP. Congratulations, you're active on the wait list now. This is your ID number. It should give you explicit instructions at that point.
Okay, let's see. Some more questions came in after I got organized, so let me go back to a lot of thank you,
Hello.
Laura. A lot of thank you. So
Diane, I see one at the bottom here. Does the individual need to be DDS approved for these housing programs?
That is a good question. And I didn't mention that. No, you don't need to be DDS approved. None of the only DDS approved programs that I had referenced in the slides are the 3% priority program and the DMH DDS set aside program and the 811 housing opportunities. Those opportunities, you do need to be involved with DMH, DDS, MRC, or Massability to qualify for those programs.
And then we have a question. We have a over 60 parent caregiver who's low income. Her son is 22. They live in a private rental. Could they qualify for help with subsidized housing? Absolutely, right? That would be
absolutely the main component for eligibility is that income thresholds. So if you fall below that income threshold that was indicated in the slides or indicated on the HUD website, you absolutely will qualify. And there are opportunities too. If you're living in a market rate apartment, if you say, hypothetically, you apply for Section 8 for a 2-bedroom Section 8 voucher, maybe you're already living in a 2-bedroom apartment, but the rent isn't affordable. Once you get your Section 8 voucher, you can approach your current landlord and ask that that your rent be changed, that you use your Section 8 voucher in your current housing situation. It may or may not be approved depending on the house needs to meet certain health and safety codes. Also, the rent needs to be reasonably priced. If your landlord is charging you, $10,000 a month, your Section 8 voucher is not going to cover 70% of that, right? It needs to be listed at a fair price, but you absolutely can qualify, and as well as your son. You can qualify as a household of two, or you can each put in your own applications.
I don't know if you can answer this question, Laura. I don't know if anyone can, but Anne asks, will federal cuts affect current and future vouchers and programs?
The short answer, probably yes. I know that some local housing authorities are really nervous about cuts. Some housing authorities are telling me that because the housing authorities have a certain amount of vouchers to give out, right? And sometimes people, for one reason or another, give up their voucher or they lose their voucher. At this point, some of the housing authorities are not reissuing those vouchers to the next person on the wait list. They're absorbing those vouchers because of the cost of housing and because of cuts at the federal level. I can say that things are always going to change, right? So I am hopeful that whatever path we go down, or whatever the result is, with maybe freezes on some of these programs or wait lists being closed, that is going to change in the future. And there recently was the Affordable Homes Act that was passed in Massachusetts, which is going to expand a lot of housing opportunities with a main focus on affordable housing. So even though there are cuts at the federal level, Massachusetts still seems to be full steam ahead with some of these housing initiatives that are in place right now. This is the biggest investment in affordable housing in Massachusetts history. I think it's $5.1 billion that the state is investing over the next 5 years to increase housing stock. So I am hopeful, even though there are cuts at the federal level, that there will still be continued opportunities and more opportunities.
Great. Diane, I don't know if you had any other questions that we maybe didn't get to.
There is another question. Why? I don't think that we addressed this. Why is there a choice statement at the bottom of DDS Home Community-Based Service page? There is a waiver ICF/ID. Will you talk about this? Why no ICF/ID?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question. I don't, the information that I covered today really doesn't have anything to do with the waivers. I think that there was a recent ARC webinar about waivers. Jackie, is that right?
Yes, we did have a webinar on waivers in June, and the link is on that resource, the second resource slide. So maybe that would, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but that might have information that would answer that question.
I hope so. I'm sorry, I can't answer it, but I believe you'll probably be able to find the information on that webinar, or find who you can reach out to about that.
And then the last question is, if your adult needs 24/7 care, should you still apply for all of these housing programs?
I would say yes. I don't know the specific situation, but it's always good to keep your options open, right? Situations could change. If your loved one requires 24/7 care today, is that going to be the case 10 years from now? Our program's going to look a little different 10 years from now. Not only that, but if your loved one requires 24/7 care, they could possibly get a 2-bedroom voucher, like a 2-bedroom Section 8 voucher for a live-in aid. Now you, the family, the individual would have to identify the live-in aid, and it would be a private pay situation, but that live-in aid's income would not be counted towards the income thresholds for these programs. That live-in aid does need to be able to pass a CORI and beat the other basic eligibility criteria of the program, but the income criteria does not apply for that live-in aid. So, and this is a creative option I hope will be discussed at length at the next presentation, because that has been a really successful plan for lots of individuals that I've worked with in the past. You get a 2-bedroom voucher through a reasonable accommodation. Also, another thing that I didn't mention today is accessory dwelling units, which is a new exciting topic. And again, that will be covered next month. But accessory dwelling units could be 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms. So if you want to keep your loved one on the same property as you and you meet the criteria, you build an accessory dwelling unit on your property, even though you might be guardian or rep payee, you could potentially still be the landlord for your loved one in an ADU. That would happen through a reasonable accommodation. But there's lots of creative plans through reasonable accommodations that can happen.
Can you give any information? Gina wants to know, where can I find out more about 811 housing? I know we did touch on that briefly.
I believe there's information on the mass.gov website, but for the most updated referral form for 811, you would want to talk with your local DDS area office. If your loved one is not DDS eligible or involved, potentially if they're eligible with Massability or with Department of Mental Health, those are also accessible. 811 is accessible through those agencies as well.
Will you discuss ICF's admissions? That's a new one that just came in.
ICFs, facilities? Yeah, so that's not part of this training. I would really refer you back to your DDS area office to talk about facilities and potential qualifications for those.
All right. Well, I think we've gotten through quite a bit of material, Laura. Thank you again so much for your time and all your work in putting together these resources that everyone, if you didn't get the PowerPoint before the meeting, you will definitely get it after with the link to the video recording. And I do, please send me, reply with those, the feedback surveys. They're anonymous. Tell us what you want to know more about. We know this is a very complicated topic. We tried to cover as much as we can in a very short time. And the follow-up one will be a creative look at building a home. But again, there might be other areas that we need to look into, and we want to provide that information. At the ARC, we believe knowledge is power. The more information that we can give you, the more you're going to be able to advocate for yourself and your loved ones. So thank you all for coming and sticking with us. And thank you, Laura, again. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.